Wow, this house is cute. But can I really get in the game in this economy? I do have savings, and I am responsible-ish. I should bury it. I'm being wild. But what if I'm not being wild, though? Could I actually score a...
Kick off your home buying journey with Zillow's new BuyAbility tool. It makes it easy to find out what you can afford, so you can get off the bench and onto the playing field with confidence. Check your BuyAbility, only on Zillow.
Every cup of Nespresso coffee is an invitation to transform your morning routine into a ritual you can treasure each and every day. Using the Virtuo Pup, a simple touch of the button freshly brews bold aromas and a rich, velvety crema layer for delicious cafe-quality coffee at home. Whether you enjoy your coffee hot or over ice, every sip, every morning is unforgettable. Nothing tastes like Nespresso coffee. Visit Nespresso.com or our app to explore our full range of easy-to-use machines and coffees not found anywhere else.
You're listening to episode 226 of the Marathon Running Podcast. In this episode, we're going to do a race recap of the Tunnel Light Marathon. This is the Marathon Running Podcast by LiQWYD and Ryan from We Got the Runs. Join us in our running community for weekly content that is motivational, educational, and inspirational, and let the Marathon Running Podcast take you from the starting line to the finish line and beyond. Hey runners, and welcome to episode 226. My name is LiQWYD.
My name is Ryan.
And we are back today with one of my favorite styles or types of episodes, which is the race recaps.
You love those race recaps.
I really do. Just like I love expos, but we're going to hop all into that. So we're going to talk about a race that I did last weekend on September 8th of 2024. I ran the Tunnel Light Marathon.
What was your time, and was it close to your predicted time that you thought?
It was better than my predicted, I think. I don't think we had a precise prediction.
No, I was just saying what you predicted your time would be. What you thought you would get.
I thought I would get right around 3:30.
And?
I got a 3:29 and something, 45. Yeah. So pretty much on point, right? What's 15 seconds and 26 miles?
Yeah, that's true. So does the race live up to its name?
Yes. There was a light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll hop all into that.
How about you? Can you tell us about the race? Or you want to go through the whole traditional recap, like traveling and everything?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's start with a little bit about the race. So I think you are on the right track here.
So where was this race?
So this race took place around North Bend, Washington State. Actually, it's a point-to-point race. So it was going from the Snoqualmie Pass to North Bend area, which is just a little bit a little bit southeast of Seattle, but obviously inland.
Have you been to that area before? Because you used to live in Washington.
Yes. So I lived in Seattle for 5 years. And while I lived there, we went on hikes in Snoqualmie. The Snoqualmie Pass is the one drive that gets you over to Eastern Washington. So I've been there a couple times. And also I recognized the area from going snowboarding because, as you know, it's in the mountains. It hasn't snowed yet, but there are all the ski lifts and all the other stuff that you enjoy when you live in the state of Washington.
Could you see some of the ski resorts while you were running?
Yes. No, not while you're running, but while you're driving to the run.
Oh, okay. So can you tell us a little bit more about the course, little details?
Yeah, so this is a point-to-point race. I think I already said that, but it's on a downhill grade. So you, in total, get about 2,000 feet of elevation loss. And I think the grade of it is like 2.2%. So it is a course that's not brutally downhill. And at some points of the race, it's not even really noticeable downhill, but you definitely have a feel of a little bit assist while you're running this. The course of the race, the terrain is packed gravel, or I guess in our case, it wasn't as packed as it could have been because it's been pretty dry up there. It's an old railroad. And so, just imagine fire road gravel, almost a little bit technical at times because of rocks in the path. And so I guess, we can talk about that later, but, for people that will not listen to the full episode, one of the biggest tips I have for this race is to not wear your Alpha Flies. Maybe go with something that sits a little bit lower and has a little bit more traction.
So it sounds like it's kind of in the wilderness a little bit, which is something I might like. But how was it set up in terms of like hydration stations or other stuff?
Yeah, so there was approximately, I think it was 10 hydration stations, and they were spread out. So every 2.5 miles, you'd come up on that. And just like in any other races, they had plenty of water. And then they also had electrolytes, which in this case, they used Tailwind. And I think they even had gels at some station, I was told, but I think I missed that one. But I mean, as you know, most runners carry their own gels anyway. So I had plenty in my pockets.
What about restrooms?
There were porta potties, supposedly. I didn't pay attention to them. I didn't need to use them, but there's also the woods, right? I mean, the woods are right there. And if you had to go urgently, it's not like you're going to go in someone's yard. So, I mean, amongst runners, amongst us and the listeners, who hasn't gone in the woods, right?
I think I might prefer the woods to a dirty bathroom, but...
And you know what, Ryan? I did too. At the starting line of the race, when I was too impatient to wait in line, I just went in the woods and I met plenty of people that were also in the woods.
Yeah, so you mentioned it was downhill. Does that make it a fast course?
Yes, it's actually rated at a BQ percentage of 33.7. So meaning that out of all the participants, 33.7% this year qualified for Boston at this race. It's a smaller race. There were 831 people that ran it this year. It was a good size though, so it never felt like super lonely. It never got drawn out that much.
Just for comparison, do you have a BQ percentage for another marathon?
Yeah, I can compare it, for example, to Chicago, which is a very flat and fast course in the United States. The BQ percentage for that one last year was 19.5%.
Oh, wow.
So, Chicago's flat. This one is on a little bit of a downhill slope.
I was actually thinking, too, if you were to do a first marathon and you wanted one, it might be good to find one, not this one necessarily, but just one that has like a gradual downhill the whole course, because it doesn't make it more difficult than your normal training, but it kind of gives you that extra little push, I think.
I agree 100%.
So you mentioned before that you weren't training much for this one. So can you comment on your training?
Yeah, so we had a really great summer with the kids, and something had to give. The training had to give. At this point, I think I had 2 weeks of a mileage higher than 50 in the last 6 months. I just looked that up on Strava. And that's, just to compare to my previous years. When I'm training for a marathon, I'm always over 60 miles per week for, 10, 20 weeks. So that was a huge difference. And so unfortunately, I feel like due to that lack of training, I couldn't take advantage of the course as much because, it was more like, okay, how long am I going to be able to sustain the pace that I'm going and when am I going to get fatigued? But I think due to the downhill, the 2% grade downhill, I didn't feel as fatigued as I probably would have felt if this would have been on flat.
Okay, those are kind of the tidbits or key talking points because you hadn't done a marathon like that and you wanted to detail it. But do you want to go into the more traditional experience of your whole weekend? So talk about your trip to Washington and the people you met there.
Yeah, so the closest airport to get to this race is obviously going to be Seattle, Tacoma. And like I said, I used to live in Seattle, so I was very familiar with the area. I traveled with my friend Patty from Fort Myers, where we currently are living, and she was going for it because she was trying to get a good time in her race. Also, we were planning on meeting up with our friend Wes, who is currently living in Boston, who was also meeting other friends from Texas. So it was a few people that I knew I was going to be able to know. We left Florida on Friday, and because of the time difference, we got to Seattle around noon. We spent the day in Seattle exploring Pike's Place Market because Patty had never been, and we also explored the waterfront and the downtown area, and I managed to meet up with one of my friends very briefly on that Friday prior to heading to our hotel to turn in for the night, and then get ready for Saturday where we would attend the expo and just chill. all that stuff that you do before the marathon.
You said met up with one of your friends. You mean like one of your Washington friends when you used to live there, or?
Yes. One of my friends that I hadn't seen since I had left there.
So day number 1, what happened on day number 2?
Day number 2 was the day of the expo. Given that your race size is a lot smaller than the marathons we usually go to, the expo was held outside of a middle school. It was very small, but it was very nicely done. You were able to quickly pick up your bib. You were able to change waves and move to an earlier or later wave if necessary. As for swag, there wasn't that much. There was nut butter that you can use in order to lubricate your skin to avoid chafing, which obviously, as you know and have seen, I forgot to apply. But then you also were able to just get some free race t-shirts from previous races, and those are really kind of nice. They were just sitting in bins and you could grab whatever. Another thing, Ryan, that you are able to get at the expo is free headlamps. And now you're going to wonder, why do you need headlamps? Well, it's called the Tunnel Light Marathon for a reason, and we'll hop into that as we talk about the race. But the race has about 2.4 miles that you are running through a pitch dark tunnel. So they were providing headlamps. I had another little light that normally gets strapped onto a bike that you can also wear kind of almost like a ring that I was planning on using and then dispose of after you exited the first section of the marathon course, which was about 2.5 miles into the race, where they had bins to put your headlights in. You could attach your number on it so you could later on retrieve that light.
The tunnel actually sounds kind of cool. I think it'd be fun to run through. Okay, so Expo Day. Anything else you do?
At the expo, I also got to meet the owner and the race director, both whom I talked to previously over the phone prior to coming. They were super, super nice, chatted for a while. And, it's just kind of like a mom and pop race. It felt very, very nice, very well organized. And I was very happy to be there. We returned to the home after eating some food. I had some pho. Patty had some Italian food because she didn't want to be exotic with her food choices. Oh, I also had oysters the night before.
Sounds like a bad choice.
I was pushing my luck. But so after that, we just returned to the room. Patty went to sleep at like 5 o'clock or 4:30. I was up till maybe 10 o'clock and then went to sleep and slept, I think, about 6 hours. The race wasn't supposed to start until 8 a.m., but we had to drive to the starting area and all that stuff, so we were up at 5.
8 a.m., but you still needed a headlamp, huh?
That's how dark that tunnel was, yeah.
So you want to talk about race day?
Yeah. So race day, like I said, we headed downstairs at the hotel, grabbed their grab-and-go breakfast, which consisted of a muffin and a banana, and they had some coffee, and drove towards the Snoqualmie Pass. So it was interesting, most races shuttle you to the beginning of the race up the hills. Here was the opposite. You drove up to the Snoqualmie Pass, parked there, and then you would run down and there would be school buses taking you back to the starting line, which I like and I don't like, right? I like that it is, it takes less time. At the same time, I want to go straight home after I'm done running normally.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I kind of like it, except for if you finish without a lot of other people around, then you might be waiting for the bus to fill before you get to ride back to your car.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't like that when I was running. It was pretty packed still, but
yeah, I think that might actually be better than in some ways, because usually at the beginning of a race you just have so many. This one isn't as big, but you have so many crowds of people all trying to get on buses to go to the starting line. So but when you're racing, like usually the starting line's super crowded, but then when you're racing and finishing, it's not as crowded because everyone's spread out.
No, exactly.
So you want to talk about start of the race?
Yes. So the race started promptly at 8 o'clock. Prior to that, we were sitting in the parking lot. The temperatures were perfect. It was in the 50s, upper 50s. So it was just kind of like where you feel like you need to move a little bit to stay warm, but you weren't freezing. I didn't even have any disposable clothes, if that tells you something.
Sometimes when you're in the mountains, it doesn't feel as bad as it really is temperature-wise.
Yeah, it felt kind of sheltered. So the race started at 8 o'clock with wave 1, but it almost felt like a rolling start. They weren't very strict about what wave had to start when. So you could almost just walk up to the starting line and then just go whenever you were ready to go. The anthem was sung, and then eventually I decided that I would start running.
Is the tunnel the first thing?
So the tunnel is about half a mile into the race. So you're going towards the freeway area, and then you see this big old railroad entrance from a tunnel. And Ryan, that tunnel is pitch black dark. It was kind of fun. It felt cooler inside of the tunnel than the regular air. But it was really dark. I'm glad I did bring my light, although obviously other people that are also wearing lights light everything up. But I felt like the footing was a little bit difficult because not only is it dark, but there's also a few potholes. And then also the track of where the railroad used to be is higher than the sides of, more towards the walls. So when you're trying to pass someone, it almost goes down. So you almost want to refrain from passing someone in the tunnel because you can't really see it that well.
Huh, yeah.
And I was really happy to have overheard a talk the day before between two runners where one of them said, "Oh yeah, I've done this race before, and stay more towards the left of the tunnel because that's flatter than the other area." So I just listened to that, and avoided all the potholes of all costs. It's called light at the end of the tunnel because about half a mile into the tunnel, you're supposed to be able to look up and see that there is light at the end of the tunnel for the next 2 miles. I was running behind some really tall guys though, so I didn't really have that luxury of seeing that light. And also I didn't want to take my eyes off the ground. And that's kind of my continual story of this race. I didn't want to look up a lot at all, even though it was very beautiful. The footing was what I was personally, struggling with a little bit.
I feel like that'll be a little anticlimactic because by the time you get out and you see the light, you still got 20 more miles to run plus.
I was thinking I would feel that way too, but it didn't feel that way.
So what other memorable parts of the first half can you talk to us about?
It's funny that you asked that question because as I was running, I was thinking about you asking me this question and I was trying to ingrain in my brain things that were different, but it kind of felt almost spread even. So you would have beautiful views if you managed to look up and take a peek on the right side, because you could see, the mountain would drop off. Sometimes there was part of the road where it would go all the way to the edge and then there was just a very steep drop off. So I was thinking about that. On the left side was where the mountain was and the forest, the woods, everything was pretty beautiful. There were ruts on the road that made it uneven pretty much the entire time. I think there was one section across a bridge towards mile 20, I could be wrong, that was paved. And those, 50, 100 feet of paved road wearing the alpha flies that I was wearing felt magical. I could feel the alpha flies pop. But the rest, not so much. I just wore the wrong shoes, but we'll talk about that.
Well, let's talk about that. Yeah, I think I've, running in the alpha flies just around the neighborhood, they don't seem to have a lot of medial lateral stability, but they're just very spongy and they're fun to run on when you have a nice surface. But running on the gravel and rutted roads, not so good, huh?
No, not at all. They don't have much traction.
Oh, that
and
too.
They are high up, so it feels very unstable. My ankles were sore the day after because I'm trying to keep stable. I knew it was going to be that effect was going to be blown up a little bit because of lack of training, because I knew I was going to fatigue out faster. And yeah, so I just also didn't have the best grip. So I constantly was almost rolling the ankles on this road, but still, that's my own fault, right, for not informing myself well enough and bringing alpha flies. I had one friend tell me, "Don't wear your alpha flies." I didn't listen, but here we are, right? It was still a lot of fun. So during that first half, I heard the sounds of nature. That was beautiful. I ran almost the entire time with people. So even though you think that number of 831 is not a lot, it felt like there was a lot of people around, surrounding you. You never felt alone. There was no wildlife sightings or anything like that. I did hear a lot of birds chirping in the trees, which was beautiful, and even saw a couple waterfalls.
Oh, that's cool. Anything distinct in the second half from the first?
Yeah, so I remember seeing rock climbers on our path a few times. After you cross one of those bridges, you saw them there belaying and climbing the rocks. So that was kind of cool too, because they were just going about their day and there was just, a marathon crossing through their path. So that was fun. That was kind of funny.
So you mentioned a railroad. So was it like an old railroad track that was converted to trail or something?
I think that's what it looked like. And I guess from what you can tell from the videos I showed you, you think that too, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So almost like a single lane road, or at least a functional portion that you can run on.
Yes, exactly. And it was a little bit higher in the middle, but I mean, it's just kind of like it's more worn on the sides. Unfortunately, I felt like, and I said that before, my legs were fatigued faster than they should have because of lack of training. But every time a biker would come up that hill on the left side, I would go back to the right side, and just crossing from the left to the right felt kind of tedious because I always thought, okay, I'm going to fall, and it didn't feel very stable. But again, Alpha Fly's combination of fatigued legs.
Yeah, well, also, given that if it was an old railroad track, usually they make the slopes very gradual. So it might be beneficial when you're running to have very gradual slopes up or down. You're not getting any sharp, steep hills.
Yeah, I didn't feel like that at all. Like at times it felt like it wasn't even downhill. But I mean, I guess that's kind of nice, right? It'd be interesting to come back and be trained for that race.
It sounds kind of cool. I mean, maybe in the future I would like to run that one.
Maybe we'll be back next year, right?
Anything else on the second half of your marathon? I had a couple of questions, but before I ask him, anything else in the second half?
Second half. We're not talking about the finish yet, right?
No.
All right. So, I mean, no, but Ryan, this race didn't feel like it would get old. I feel like normally you're running 26 miles and around mile 20, you're kind of over it. And even though I was tired, I felt like it was just beautiful. And it didn't bother me to be running that race as much as it normally bothers me to finish.
Yeah, maybe the downhill helped too. Do you want to go into the finish then?
Yeah, so I crossed the finish line. I saw the finish line and I realized how close I was to beating that 3:30. So I picked it up a little bit at the end and finished. There were a ton of medical tent chairs available, so I just sat down for a second. I feel like I had pulled something in my foot the entire race. I don't know if it was because I had stepped on a rut or a rock or something, but right where my plantar fascia is, that area had been really, really tight. So when I sat down, I might have shed a tear or two. I don't know. And then I saw Wes too, and it felt good because it was someone I knew. So I might have shed another tear. And that was the finish. The finish line was kind of fun. They had plenty of food there. They had a whole pool, one of those pop-up pools with cold water, so you could step into that pool. And there was a ton of cool people. There was one guy that we'd been seeing at the hotel over and over and became friends with. He was there with his daughter and his granddaughter. And then another guy that I didn't realize where I knew him from. He was also staying in my hotel. I had said hi to him and I'd asked him where I knew him from and he couldn't remember it. He was wearing an LA Marathon shirt. So I was like, oh, maybe from there. When I saw him at the pool, he was like, I remember where I knew you from. And he said that we had met in Tokyo at the race at a sushi bar because, I kind of hung out by myself in Tokyo. So I was chatting up people and he, I guess, was one of the lucky ones. So then we reminisced, and he was there with his friends. So we all hung out and it was kind of fun. It was a fun finish line.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day. And that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most. at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
I think I just won my taxes.
Yeah?
I just switched to H&R Block in about 1 minute. All I had to do was drag and drop last year's return into H&R Block, and bam, my information is automatically there.
So I don't have to go digging around for all my old papers to switch?
Nope.
Sounds like we just leveled up our tax game.
Switching to H&R Block is easy. Just drag and drop your last return. It's better with Block.
Just for reference, I don't think you've ever had a marathon where you haven't cried.
I don't remember that like that, but
So a couple questions. Like it's an atypical race for you, I guess, for marathons in general. You're used to running on cities. You're a people person, streets. How does this compare to the typical marathon?
it's just a different experience, right? The reason I booked my flight out of Washington the same night at midnight was not just because I wanted to go back to my family, but because I knew there wasn't going to be the race fanfare that you're usually used to. Normally you finish a race in one of those major cities and then there's a happy hour and then there's stuff going on in the evenings. With this one, I knew it was going to pretty much end at noon at the finish line. And then you just take the buses back to your car. And, then what are you going to do? You're in this little town. So I knew that was going to happen. The other thing, obviously I love expos, but I knew what I was going into with this experience, and I don't really mind these races, but I feel like you would have really enjoyed this type of race because you're not so much of a people person. And
well, I'm not a big crowd person. I don't mind people. I just like big crowds. I don't like as much as you.
Yeah, so I think you would have really liked it. You also are into
Outdoors.
trails and outdoors and that kind of stuff. I think that race would have really been up your alley. And I feel like this trip would have been fun to do as a family as well, because there's so much to do with nature as well, while you're there. Whereas I feel like when you go to these big, concrete jungles, it's not as fun with smaller kids to just try to do everything marathon related.
So you'd go back?
I think I would go back. The one thing that was difficult is the gravel. And again, it's something that you can prepare yourself for. Other than that, the course is really, really good. The weather was perfect. You just have to be prepared for the race.
Do you have a specific shoe you'd recommend? Maybe even I love racing in Nike Alpha Flies for my fast races. And I feel like you could have maybe gotten away with this one with the Hoka Cielo X, which is also a carbon plated shoe, but it just is more stable. It's wider at the bottoms, maybe a tiny bit heavier. I feel like that would have been better. And then of course there's trail shoes, but as you know, and as you guys know, we're doing reviews of shoes on YouTube. We've just started reviewing some trail shoes. So I can't recommend a trail shoe, but for a road racing shoe, I think you could just get away with a pair of Cielo X's. You haven't had a lot of experience with trail shoes.
I have not, other than the all-weather conditioning gear from Nike and that one pair of Hokas that we used while we were in California, the Speedgoat 6s. It's kind of in your head, I think, too, that we always try to get the lightest shoes for races. But in reality, I don't know if we'd even notice if shoes were heavier by a whole ounce or so.
So do you have any final thoughts on the Tunnel Light Marathon? And can you give it a rating?
Final thoughts. It's a beautiful race. I think everyone should do themselves a favor if they are going to do a downhill race. Sign up for one of those. It's not an aggressive downhill. It's very enjoyable. It's a very beautiful course. It's very easy to navigate to logistically. Rating, Ryan, you know me in rating. I would probably rate it a 9 out of 10, but that's only to my own fault of not having been prepared better. Again, I feel like if you're going to run a course like that, be prepared and take advantage of that slight downhill slope. Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting your time with a race like that. So that's pretty much it about this race.
Are you going to do a YouTube video about the race?
I will probably put something up because I brought my little camera and captured some images and videos that words cannot, how do you say that?
Describe?
Words cannot describe the beauty of it, and the gravel. I want you guys to see the gravel, so you're better prepared than me. And yeah.
So if you want to see what Letty's been describing, go to the YouTube channel. Also, there's a current giveaway till September 27th, and watch out for scammers. Don't listen to any emails or anything else, because Letty, are you going to give the winner on your YouTube channel?
Oh yeah, a little background why Ryan is saying this. I have posted my very first contest on YouTube. You can win a Hoka Cielo X pair of shoes. And I did everything according to the guidelines of YouTube. However, somebody created a fake account and started notifying people that they had won after entering into the contest. The only handle that we have on YouTube is @running_podcast. There is no Letty Runs. I call myself Letty Runs on the channel, but there is no @Letty Runs or anything else. And Ryan and I have decided that we're going to release the news of the winner via a video, and then we will contact the winner directly. Probably give them a code or something so we can get the correct address. I'm like super into online security now, and I guess it's just going to be a couple step process. But yeah.
And hopefully more shoes in the future.
Yes. We'll have another giveaway in October.
So stay tuned for next week.
Yes, because next week, speaking about shoes, we're going to have a podcast on how to purchase or what to consider when you're purchasing your running shoes.
Just in time for running season.
Exactly. So congratulations to everybody who raced Sydney. Good luck to everyone that is racing Berlin and coming up Chicago.
And with that,
have a great week of running. Thanks for tuning in. For more information and marathon running news, please head to www.marathonrunningpodcast.com, and we'll be back next week.
Are you looking for the perfect apparel that mirrors your love for running? Look no further than Run Swag, the go-to store by runners for runners. From witty tees to hoodies that commemorate your marathon majors to crops that get you motivated, Run Swag's got you covered. Discover the perfect blend of comfort and style. Visit www.runswag.com. Run Swag, there's something for every runner.